Welcome to another episode of America Uncanceled on CPAC Now. Happy to be here with Mercy, where we cover the most important things happening in the world. And right now it seems like everything that's important is happening in the House of Representatives. And after a heavily contested vote for Speaker, 20 House Republicans stood against the status quo to secure several hard-fought negotiated wins for conservatives and for our entire country. How can the GOP continue to promulgate conservative thought and continue the example set by these excellent statesmen and stateswomen? Joining us today to discuss the speakership vote and the future of the Republican Party is one of our favorites and a stalwart conservative, Congressman Ralph Norman from South Carolina, who boasts a perfect voting record for the last several Congresses with CPAC. Congressman Norman, thanks for being with us.
Glad to be with you, Matt. Mercy, y'all have got a great program. Enjoy being on it.
So, and we enjoy every time we run at you on there on the campaign trail and hanging out with all the right people. But Congressman, usually when we do an interview, we do two things. We look up their ACU rating. Okay, yours, I don't want to brag too much on you because you might, it might get to your head, but that's a perfect voting record. Is pretty unusual. And then the second thing you do is look at the committees that members on. It kind of tells you what they might focus on. But there's a little bit in flux as to who's on what committee. Have your committees changed, or what's the status of that?
Oh yeah, all the committees. We're putting conservatives on that have never been on committees before. I just found out before I walked in there, Andrew Clyde's on appropriations now. Wow. He's a staunch conservative. Andy Harris has been there. And but no, it's what happened in this last week helped change this country for the better. That we haven't seen this since for 100 years. And it starts with committees. You're going to see people that you have never seen before on Rules Committee, and it's the gatekeeper for the bills that come through. And that's what's been so frustrating. I mean, the things that have hit the floor that we've had to vote on. Now, Pelosi ran a tight ship, and she got her ways implemented on every member of the body, which was a feat in and of itself, particularly with the AOCs of the world. But no, it's a great day now, and I'm glad it's happening. It could not have come at a better time.
Yeah, I got to ask you, Congressman, we were all watching and we kept going, okay, I think we were making bets up to what ballot it was going to go till for the speaker's race. How was it when you were on the floor? What was sort of the sense from the members? Was it so contentious down there, or was it contentious, but yet you all knew you would come to a good resolution with a very strong negotiation?
No, Mercy, it was very tense. I mean, it started out, the backdrop for all this, and Matt, you'll find this interesting. See, it started out we had our caucus meeting, and leadership had everybody lined up to speak. The vote, was 182 previously for Kevin McCarthy. And this was never about Kevin. I like Kevin.
Right.
But at that meeting, it was, everybody had to be in lockstep. Well, I'm sorry, there were 32 of us that did not vote for him when the caucus voted. But when we came in Tuesday, it was just kind of like you had to do this. And then when Mike Rogers said that if you don't, you lose your committee assignments, that's when I lost.
Oh boy, yeah.
And I spoke, and Chip Roy spoke, and Scott Perry, and basically said, throw us off the committees if that's what you're going to do. And so our group started with 5 who said we're not going to vote for Kevin under any circumstance. And then really after that meeting, when Mike Rogers said that, it went from 5 to 8 who were publicly out there saying we're not voting for Kevin, up to 20. And see, the public doesn't know, we had these suggestions to Kevin months earlier. The attention was all on vacate the chair, but we had things like end and end blocks where you didn't know who was voting on what. 72 hours to get a bill. The omnibus was 4,155 pages long, and the night before. I'm a speed reader, but I can't read that fast. But it's basic things like that. And to be honest, and we said this publicly, we never heard a word until after November 8th.
Right.
The red wave didn't occur. Our margins, as you know, are very slim.
Right.
We've got a 222 to 212, which for 218 we've got a 4-vote margin that you can't lose anybody. So it had been since 1923 that then in 1923 it took 9 ballots. I didn't know how many ballots it was going to take. We were prepared to sit there. And we went through, luckily the Republican Party has got true conservatives that you can put up. Andy Biggs is a true conservative. Byron Donalds is a true conservative. Jim Jordan is a true conservative. And but our negotiations started because of we were willing to sit there. And the press is unbelievable. I mean, for Newt Gingrich to take the position he did, and he blasted us, hurting democracy, we're holding up the whole government can't function. Trey Gowdy was another one. Now, they've changed their tune since, but what do? The most powerful person, I would argue, is the Speaker of the House and the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. They're third in line for president. So what's taken, if it took 5 days, but let's say it's taken 2 weeks, what's the rush? To pick somebody. So it all happened well. To be honest, the last 15th vote, I didn't know how I was going to vote until I stood up. But I thought it was time. Kevin had negotiated in good faith.
Yeah.
And I think it worked out well.
Well, Ralph Norman, good job on getting us to a conclusion with the right policies. It was never a personality conflict, as the press liked to make it. It was about substantial things. And so let's look forward. I was a former House staffer. Mercy was a former House staffer. I served when our majority was big and when it was much smaller. And sometimes there's more cohesion in a much smaller majority because you kind of need almost everybody. So I'm hopeful that people stick together. What are the kind of things you're already getting done and you're unified on getting done?
Well, first of all, and I said from day one, whoever ends up being Speaker, I will support fully, including Kevin McCarthy. And I support him. We're one team now. Now, we had to get some changes like balanced budget. My whole, the starting point with me, and I'd asked Kevin earlier, would he agree to the RSC, Republican Study Committee, 7-year budget? And he just said no. Now, he's come back. He's agreed to a 10-year budget. We've got things like if you increase the federal tax, that has to be a 3/5 vote in the House. Things like the 12 appropriations have to be on time. Things, the Cutco. If you increase mandatory spending, you got to have a decrease. The same thing with the federal with the debt limit. What the Senate did was not fair. What they did, saddle us with that till September 30th, which is the new budget. Should not have happened. We should have decided on things like that. 72-hour rule. The budget's the big thing for me. Term limits is a big thing for me. And when I say big, just getting it on the House floor to vote on. Mm-hmm. And mine is 6 years in the House, 12 years in the Senate, 2 terms. And it's just common sense things that the country freedom is preserved, to be honest with you, by the changes that Kevin will, and to his credit, will implement, has agreed to. And so I look forward to mainly the balanced budget. Economic security is national security. If we don't have that, all ceases to exist, and freedom as we know it will go away.
No kidding. And I think one of the things that we're looking at is as the Biden administration has moved so aggressively in impacting our energy industry in such a negative way, where we have moved away from energy independence. Also, as so many economists have said, that we're entering into this recession. Inflation's still not under control. American people are suffering. Up to what point? What can the House do to make sure that we don't make matters worse, but try to find a way that there can be economic stability in America?
Broadcast front and center stage the important things. But the Biden administration, the invasion on our border, crime in the streets, the spending, we can't, we've got to be honest, a Democrat Senate, even with some Republicans that switch over. Are the odds on we rescinded the pay for the 87,000 IRS agents. Is it going to pass the Senate? Will Joe Biden not veto it? Of course he'll veto it. Of course it won't go through the Senate. But I only use the tools in the toolbox. Our toolbox is governing and putting bills forward that let him veto it and get the public ginned up on what's happening. We had a press conference today on keeping the Supreme Court at 9. They're trying to hijack that and put 4 new Supreme Court justices, which is just for political power.
Right.
And the good news is, with this, and Matt, you mentioned the slim majority, we've got to be together. But we're making people vote on different things. Any spending, large or small, has to be voted on. No more suspensions with end blocks where you can tie them all together, and the American people don't get a view of what their congressman is voting up or down. So we'll put them in front of the American people. You'll see it, just like you saw what took place on the House floor was a good thing. That's democracy, and you're going to see it now as we move forward for the next 2 years under this administration, which is doing a good job to destroy this country.
Sure is. We always said here at CPAC, it's America versus socialism, and I know there are people that think they can be that leftist and be for America, but you're not consistent with our founding principles in any shape, manner, or form. I agree with you on the supplemental. If you want to get rid of 87,000 IRS agents, you got to get it on something like that omnibus, excuse me, not the supplemental, but the omnibus. That was a big whiff to get the types of things we want on there. So now I assume we're going to be dealing with the end of the fiscal year, and we'll have to pass another budget vehicle. You can never predict what kind of synonym to omnibus, minibus, blah, blah, blah these guys are going to pass, although it sounds like you have a commitment to actually pass appropriations bills in the House, which is a good thing. Shouldn't we start basically through this appropriations process figuring out as a conference in the House what we will stand up and fight to the death on issues are? Can that conversation start tomorrow?
Absolutely. It's got to start tomorrow, Matt. We cannot be put in a position, and we knew what the Senate was going to do. They were going to jam us and put it on Christmas Eve, where people won't have commitments. They want to get home to their families.
Yep.
We cannot put up with that. We've got us, and Kevin will send a message to the Senate that if they can try to pass that trick, do that trick again, we're not going to pass anything that they submit. And I think the good news, I think you'll see government slow down. The bad bills or the pills that we've been forced to swallow are going to change. And where I disagreed with leadership and the powers that be, they would accept things that they never should have accepted anyway. I'm from the business arena. I mean, you bargain hard, you get the best for the country, but now I think we will come closer to doing that and saying no, because they've got to have us on board. The same 20 that did what we did is still there, and we will band together to do what makes sense. And y'all know this, everybody's a fiscal conservative until the particular cuts their particular agency in their state. I get that, but now we cannot take any more half measures that are going to bankrupt this country.
Right.
And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Let's talk about this new, the House approved the GOP inquiry into the formation of the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the federal government. Explain to me what that looks to accomplish.
A couple of things. One is it's the Church Committee, and it's going to investigate the FBI, Department of Justice, which has all been weaponized under this administration. They've weaponized it to go after people. We'll have subpoena powers. We'll have the same funding that the January 6th committee had to put people on. But more importantly, we will call people in to testify and hopefully have consequences if they perjured themselves. I haven't seen that. I've been on oversight now since I got to Congress, and it hasn't been under the Pelosi. It hasn't been a legitimate oversight hearing. It's all either been on woke cultures or inequity or how everybody's a victim, and they would line them up to these hearings. It's very frustrating. But no, the Church Committee it couldn't come too quick enough to get people in place that know how to ask the right questions, and hopefully it can have some consequences. Unlike Benghazi, Hillary Clinton should be behind bars for what she did, and a lot of other people. And so I think hopefully they will do that. And James Comer is committed to it. Jim Jordan's definitely committed to it. And it will be under, the Church Committee will be under Jim Jordan for him to oversee.
Well, Jim Jordan has a lot to do. James Comer on the Oversight Committee, they have a lot to do, because basically that's going to fill in all the lack of legislative ability to pass anything. Let's face it, we can pass anything we want through the House almost, even though it's a slim majority, and it's got to still get through a Senate. So nobody should have their expectations, out of control on what could actually become law. But in the meantime, we can do a lot on oversight, and you mentioned you play a role in that. We're reading about what Jim Jordan's going to do, and we read about Hunter Biden, and kind of going back and reprising all the falsehoods that happened under the Democrats. But what's your number one or top two things you want to see that committee do?
Well, China is the biggest threat we face. I see it in South Carolina. We called attention to the Confucius Institutes for the two private colleges and a university in South Carolina. They did away with it. China is not only militarily are they above us now, particularly with the space exploration, but they're just infiltrating everything from TikTok to the land that they're buying around our military installations. And so we've got to stop that. I think first thing, he will get the Biden administration's officers in, Hunter Biden in, and see how compromised they are. And it's, with the news about the papers that were in a lockbox that his account, I think his lawyer found it, classified. He didn't have, as VP, he didn't have that authority to do that. But we'll see where that takes us with the Biden administration. And then you'll get into, Mayorkas has got to go. The Holman Rule, which lets us defund programs, he's the first that ought to be defunded, and get him in to see what Dr. Fauci, what he knew about the coronavirus and what he didn't know. But we've got so many that thank God we're doing it now, and we'll put the people on the committees that ask the questions that'll get the job done.
Right. Well, we need to reveal the truth. I think for the American people deserve to know the answers. What happened with COVID, what's happening with big tech and censorship of conservatives, and really the manipulation of the federal government and their misuse of power. So thank you, Congressman Ralph Norman, a friend of CPAC's, and we hope to see you at CPAC in March here in the Washington, D.C. area.
Thank you for what you do. I'll be there.
Great. Well, and remember, we have expanded to the podcast world, and you can listen to America Uncanceled with Matt and Mercedes Schlapp wherever you get your podcast, and get your CPAC tickets first weekend in March.
Go to conservative.org, go to cpac.org, get those tickets. It's a very important CPAC, I think, for the world and also for our country. It's going to be a rallying cry, and it's an important time for conservatives to come back to their nation's capital, to reclaim some ground.
Especially that we have reclaimed some ground at the House of Representatives because of these very brave congressmen that stood up to really make significant changes in Congress. So thank you all for watching, and God bless.